the latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. Those who are liking, sharing, commenting, my old, new, and returning subscribers, I say thank you so much. A bold revelation by a white professor. Yellow people, according to him, their time of reign is coming to an end, and Africa is going to rise. That the world that we saw in the 1980s, in the early 2000s, a different world from what we are seeing today. And that these people have done something that is so superb. And that is the reason to which they are in a comfortable lead. And that is by keeping Africa poor economically. That their economic relationship with Africa has been the reason to which they are where they are. And Africa has continued to be where it is by exploiting Africa. That the kind of bad things that they've done in Africa are heartbreaking. And that these people have kept in a system. And it's the system that is making sure they live in a world that we sit in Africa and admire. Like some of us have the notion that when you get there, that's the heaven. Everything of your life is going to change. And finally, when we get there, we see that even though they have beautiful places, they have things that we are not having in Africa, but it is not the narrative that we see. That these are systems. That yes, when you get there, you see the iPhones we are using, the technology that they bring to us. We are not having that. And we see that these things that are coming from there are very beautiful. But all these things are gotten from Africa. They make sure Africa never rises. And that when you keep something at a place for a very long time, without it changing, it means that thing is very important. That is how important Africa is. When everything in the world changes, but Africa continues to remain where it is 800 years ago. Our leaders, as always we say, they are not ready for a change. They are not doing everything possible to do something differently. These people created a system, and that is what we are always following for all these years, all these centuries. And until we change the system that these people created, Africa, we will not see the change that we want to see.
George Friedman, the geopolitical analyst, he wrote a book in the early 2000s called The Next 100 Years, where he tried to sort of forecast what the world might look like in the year 2100. He began by talking about what the world looked like in the year 1900, and then he goes sort of decade by decade, how radically everything changed between, say, 1900 and 1930, or 1930 to 1950, and so on. And it's truly astonishing how many drastic paradigm shifts took place. Empires fell, empires rose, world wars, on and on. Really breathtaking global shifts. When you look at history that way, it's hard to wrap your head around how many changes can actually take place in a relatively short amount of time. Basically, within one person's lifetime, everything can change. You know, in 1900, like he says in his book, London was the center of the world. There was no communism, no Soviet Union. There was the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and so on. The Americans mostly stayed on their side of the Atlantic. And it seemed like this is how things would just be, you know, indefinitely. But just a short 40 years or so later, everything changed. England was demolished in the World War. The Ottomans were gone. The Soviets emerged. Germany took over France, on and on. Really radical, unthinkable changes. Then if you go ahead a few more decades to the 1980s, again, it seems like a completely different world. And then on forward to the 2000s, it's remarkable. Everything changed. And when you think about that, when you think about how many huge paradigmatic pendulum swings there have been that have taken place and that do take place in just a matter of decades, it makes certain continuities even more astonishing. When you're able to maintain a constant amidst the radical changes that sweep over every other element of international relations, global power relationships, international relations, and so on, when you're able to actually keep something unchanged, it lets you know just how important, how paramount it is that this particular status quo remains intact, how important it is to those who are keeping it intact. And I'm talking now about the West's relationship with Africa, because the West's economic relationship with Africa has not fundamentally changed in over 800 years. This is absolutely stunning. If the drastic and rapid changes that can occur and have occurred within the West over just 1 or 2 decades, if that's breathtaking, well, what about the fact that nothing has changed between the West and Africa in basically a millennium. I mean, the relationship was ruthlessly extractive 800 years ago, and it's ruthlessly extractive now. And you can't help but recognize that keeping things this way simply must not only be important to the West, but literally it must be the most important thing to the West. It's so important to them that they have always maintained this status quo no matter what else changes in the world. Wallahi, they're dedicated to the subjugation and the exploitation of Africa more than they're dedicated to anything else. Everything else is allowed to change except for this. This must never change. And it's not difficult to see why. I mean, it's the subjugation and the exploitation of Africa that has enabled the West to impersonate a superior civilization. It's like a con man, a drifter who tries to convince people that he's some sort of an aristocrat or a monarch or something. Well, he needs to have some kind of a display of a monarch's wealth in order to be convincing. And that's been the whole basis for what the West claims about itself being superior. The whole basis has always been that they're materially successful. So, okay, today you have iPhones and technology, you have a high standard of living and so forth. So that means that you must be better. You must be more intelligent. You must be more evolved. You must be more civilized, more advanced than the rest of us. I mean, look how nice their places are. See how much better their stuff is. Well, this is all reliant upon the vicious pillage and plunder of Africa. Without this subjugation, without this exploitation of Africa, Europe and the West would be nothing but crude, emaciated serfs, barely producing enough to survive. Their wealth was primarily derived from theft and plunder, from piracy and slavery, from mass murder and crime. This is just the historical reality. Because of the subjugation of Africa, first through chattel slavery, the extraction of Africa's human resources, and now through the extraction of natural resources, the West has been able to maintain this artificial, unearned status as a so-called civilization. Keeping Africa subject, subordinate, suppressed, and impoverished is an existential need for the West. It's the only way that they can keep up the pretense of their supremacy. Because again, the pretense of their supremacy has never been based upon any actual advancement, any actual sophistication, any actual moral or intellectual development. It has always been based on the violent accumulation of wealth and resources, upon brute power, deceit, and conniving. And Africa, the subjugation of Africa, is the most vital necessity for keeping this con going. I mean, right now, the trade relationship between the West and Africa is that something like 70% of exports to Africa from the West are manufactured goods, and imports from Africa are just the raw materials used to make those manufactured goods. So they're taking from Africa what is needed in order to produce goods that then Africa buys from the West, made with their own raw materials. And the West has done everything possible to try to impede Africa's ability to build its own manufacturing base so that they could potentially use their own raw materials, use their own raw minerals to produce their own goods. I mean, the whole process should be done in-house. It should all be done in Africa. That's what makes sense. You have the materials, you have the minerals, you can make the products. That's how it should be. Rather than giving your raw natural resources to the West for them to manufacture and refine and process and so on, Africa could do all of those things themselves. I mean, imagine the impact that would have. Where would that leave the West then? Well, they know that. The West knows that. They're acutely aware of their actual total dependence upon Africa. If Africa manufactured, if they used their own resources, their own minerals, their own materials for their own industries, well, the entire economy of the West would collapse. And with the collapse of their economy, their whole so-called civilization would collapse. Africa is the foundation upon which they built their house. So they know this. And like I said, this is why no matter what else changes in the world, no matter how power dynamics shift in the world, the subjugation of Africa has been maintained for over 800 years. There's literally nothing more important to them than this. And this is why there are very powerful factions in the West that want to destroy BRICS, and why they fearmonger about Chinese investment in Africa, and why America specifically is engaged in non-stop interference, covert operations, regime change, regime infiltration projects all across the continent. Well, like I said, that should show you what kind of a friend the West is. But look, South Africa, and all the countries in Africa, all the countries in the global South, in fact, they're in a position today to actually dictate the terms now. If Westerners want to pull out their capital, so say you nationalize, okay, if Westerners want to pull out their capital, they want to withdraw their investments, okay, go ahead. Dig around in your own lands for the minerals you need to make your stuff, and good luck to you. I mean, we have other investors anyway who can take your place. There's other companies that we can partner with. You're not the only ones. So the only question really is, how much are you interested in boosting the economies of China, the economy of Russia, the economy of the Gulf? How much do you want to see the BRICS countries surpass you economically? You know, BRICS already accounts for more of global GDP than the G7. So if you want to pull out your investments, you pull them out. Go ahead. You can only harm yourselves. No. South Africa and the Muslim world and all the global South countries, it's time for them to break away from this paradigm, break away from Western domination and start implementing all of those policies that they know perfectly well will benefit them, whether America likes it or not. I mean, can you imagine if the Gulf countries didn't put their oil sector under government control? Where would they be now? But look at where they are now. Look at the amount of capital they have now. While South Africa could have and should have a comparably massive sovereign wealth fund. There's no reason for them not to. No, this millennium-long system of subjugation needs to come to an end. And it really doesn't matter if the road to liberation is a little bit rocky. I'd rather be traversing a rocky road than be buried under the rubble, which is where the West has kept Africa for centuries. This is the richest and most important continent on the planet. And the West stole your riches and they stole your importance, and they've been an imposter on the throne for far too long. It doesn't make any sense to be afraid of someone whose power is actually dependent upon you. That's a psychological power, not an actual power. They have a psychological power over you. But every element of their real power is completely derived from you yourselves. It's like your hand is on the tap that the hose is attached to that they use to waterboard you. And all you have to do is turn it off.
That is why Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso understood that yes, if we want to defeat these people, if we want to see a change in Africa, then we should be able to put in something that is different from what we already know. We can't continue to be practicing the same thing, expecting different results. These people, because of the systems that they've created, they are just relaxing. And we are the ones that are making sure the systems that they've created are running for them. And they keep getting whatsoever that they want from Africa. And Africa continues to remain where it is. But that the time has come for us to change. We will rule the world because their empire is at the verge of collapsing. But we cannot rule the world if majority of the leaders are still here singing democracy. Always we are talking about democracy. We've seen what is happening in Gabon and people are happy. The same thing that we've seen in Gabon is not going to change the narrative in Gabon. It's still the same oppressor rule. Why is it that these people are so much interested in calling African leaders into democracy and making sure they praise all the African leaders that are singing democracy? This is a system that was created by them, and they know how the system is working, and they know what they get out of the system, because without us, the West is nothing. All the riches, all the empowerment, all the strength that they have are from here. According to the professor, these people can never do anything on their own. They don't have any system or anything that they have designed for themselves to be able to sustain themselves. The only thing that they have done best is how to keep Africa where it is, African poor, for them to keep enriching themselves. That is the only system that they've designed. And if the African is able to break free from this system, then we'll see the collapse of Yellow Purple. And that is what Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are doing to make sure that we will rise up. And others are still sitting, calling them back into the same system that these people have created. We can never develop, we can never defeat them if we don't rise up against those systems that these people have created. This is a powerful message and a powerful revelation. And all of us must come and listen and learn. And the youth that are always yearning for all the things of Yellow Purple, if you continue to have the desire for all the things of Yellow Purple and thinking that Africa is hell, Africa, there is no opportunity for you, so you must move out of here to go and work or move to yellow purpose country before you can see a better life. We have to redecolonize that mentality, because these are the things that these people are doing. And some of us, when we come to the comment section, instead of us to look beyond what the message is, you'll be here telling me how false, how gullible me and my followers are, because we Africans, we don't read beyond what we have. When something is put before you, you look at the contextual meaning. And if Nkrumah said the independence of Ghana is meaningless, with that it's linked to the total liberation of Africa, we sit here and we think that it's only we those in Africa. Nkrumah was talking to all black people, whether in the Caribbean, in the United States, wherever these people are found, until we are all free. The independence of Ghana is meaningless. So that is how we look at things. When something is put before you, I read meaning into what the person has given. I go beyond the message that was given to you to bring you the in-depth knowledge, the in-depth message. And you sit here and tell me my followers and myself are gullible. Africans, wherever we go, we are only going there to look at the bad things, and that is why we are not moving. But the moment we shift to the yellow purpose media platforms, we love everything that they say. These are all programs that they've programmed the African mind so that we cannot come together to fight their systems. Until we are able to decolonize our mentality, to embrace ourselves and embrace whatsoever that we have as a people, Africa will not move forward. And this is a powerful message to all of us. And that is why always I tell you, the greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world and in the West.